Hey there, Jim Johnson for Accent Help here, and we're working our way through the Vowel+R lexical sets. The lexical sets are based on the work of J.C. Wells in his Accents of English, Volume 1, and so he commonly calls this set START. START. Great. So when it's commonly written, it's written with the ah, as in what I've made the subset, they're the lexical set of father. J.C. Wells uses palm, like the palm of my hand, but most Americans don't say palm, they say palm. So that's why I switched over to father to try to keep it clearer. Anyway, it tends to be written with, so I'm going to go with my word on that one for now. It tends to be written with the father vowel before the R sound, okay? So when you have this occurrence, here's the deal. Father, father, start. I don't think most Americans actually use the same vowel. Let me take father and go to the word far. Father, far, far, far. I think most Americans go a little bit closer to what I'm doing there. Father, father. That would be weird. You know? It's not that weird. It's actually what you'll tend to hear throughout the Rockies. Because throughout the Rockies, they tend to say father, father lot instead of father lot. There tends to be a little bit of rounding for American accents there. Anyway, this little bit of rounding that seems to happen on that, I think the cause of that is that something that'll occur for all of these Vowel+R is that Americans have a tendency to round their lips slightly when they're making R's. So when we say even just a beginning R, red, when we do an R at the beginning of a word, part of what very commonly happens, I find, is most Americans round their lips. Round their lips. Instead of going round, 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 there's this extra rounding, which is part of why the R sounds further back in American accents because the front is moved further forward. That's a conversation for another day. But this rounding effect that tends to happen with R's carries over to vowel versions of R's. So there's a slight rounding that tends to happen there. I've just used a diacritic that means additional lip rounding. There's a couple of diacritics. There's one that goes this way, one that goes this way. This basically means more lip rounding. This means less lip rounding. Well, this is the unrounded version of this vowel. If I wanted to use the rounded version, it's the turned script A. This is the script A, the turned script A, which is one that we used. This is a part of what I call Hell's Corner. Father, lot, cloth, thought, or New Yorkers. Father, lot, cloth, thought, or Boston. Father, father, lot, cloth, thought. So it depends on the accent. Or as I was just talking about the Rockies, father, lot, cloth, thought, all the same. Okay. Sorry if I just knocked you unconscious with too much information. Information vomit. You're welcome for that image. So this rounding, this would be like la, father, far, start. It's pretty close. Start, start. It's close, but once again, if for no other reason than the default I like to go with is go with the symbols that you tend to see in pronouncing dictionaries and in most resources, and then tweak those symbols. I want to stick with this symbol, and I want to add the lip rounding underneath it to say the way that most Americans say this is more like start, far, bar, car. There's a little bit of lip rounding that tends to happen there. So I think this is the reality of like a relaxed generic American, generic accent. Little bit of lip rounding happening on this one. Now when you get to non-rhotic accents, most of the ones that we've had so far, like near and square, for example, what happens is you just lose the rhoticity. And you maybe even smear it all over the place. You lose the rhoticity and it becomes near, square, right? But this is the one where very commonly when you go to the non-rhotic version, you simply get rid of this altogether and it becomes start, like Boston, start, park your car in Harvard Yard. It just gets rid of the R, the schwa rhoticity completely. most of the time when you're dealing with a non-rhotic accent. This holds true in England as well when you're dealing with non-rhotic accents. Start, start, depending on what that accent is of England, for example. So this is a little bit of a variation on some things that we've had before, okay? Beyond that, in many ways, this is kind of a simple one. You know, it's fairly straightforward. There don't tend to be some major variations within it that happen, other than the fact that we tend to have that little bit of lip rounding that usually happens there. And then I'd say, otherwise it may shift a little bit depending on the accent. Like in Boston, it tends to move a little bit forward, so it becomes more like start. Whereas a New Yorker will tend to hold on to this, even though the R is gone, and say something more like start. You're going to start? You starting with me? Start. There's a little bit of lip rounding that tends to happen for New Yorkers. It's just a carryover of what happens for most Americans with a slight lip rounding on that vowel. Cool. That's maybe a lot of in-depth for something that's actually pretty straightforward and fairly simple. So sorry if I just made it more confusing, but I don't care. Actually, I do, but whatever. If you want to dive more into phonetics and generic and accents, you can find those materials and lots of other materials for actors at accenthelp.com.